Thank you. I'm very grateful that you're here, and I'd like to present Diana L. from GSO.
Oh no, it's okay. Save the bottle. Don't take the bottle. No, just kidding. Just kidding. What's this?
Oh, is this a fan? Because I was.
Oh, I love that. It's a fan. I love that. That's so technical. I love that. I'm like old school. I've got a fan. I was like, I get so. Sorry. I think if anything you realize it's alcoholism, not wasm. But that's good. Oh my goodness. My name's Diana and I'm an alcoholic. And it's good to be here. Good morning. And it's good to be sober. Just to be sober. I love the way that I feel inside because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the gift of sobriety. And no matter where I am, no matter where I go, when I can get back to that little moment of this, feeling grateful for my sobriety, that the freedom that I have in my life, I can go anywhere and be with anybody. And, you know, they say Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where strangers come to reminisce. And I can feel that, you know? Yeah, and you feel it in different ways when you travel in AA, you know? When you're like me, sometimes I'm crazy and I need a meeting, but everybody looks like they don't want to talk to me. You know how that happens. And so you're just about to make, you know, I'm going to prove my sponsor wrong here. I'm going to the meeting and nobody's going to say hi to me and all that craziness. But once the meeting starts, you realize these are strangers. Yeah, they may not like you. So what? But when we start reminiscing and we start bringing that message that has given us all hope, there's something very beautiful about that. And I feel like there's times when I go to meetings and I don't feel like I want to be there. I'm excited. I feel connected. And like coming here to this event, I had excitement because I knew I was going to see people I remember from conference and people from past, you know, service. It's that feeling of connectiveness. I think I get so happy on the inside about seeing people because I suffered from alcoholism, the disease of loneliness that only a drink can cure. You know, next to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's no other solution that can cure that loneliness, you know, and I'm just very grateful, you know, and maybe that's helped me stay sober one day at a time, you know, in AA. That's an attitude of gratitude. And I don't know, I know there's a lot of people that are new to service and new to being a GSR. I was just curious if you wouldn't mind to show me, is there anybody here with 10 years or less of sobriety? Nice, thank you, I appreciate that, thank you. And is there anybody here in their first year? I know you are, I was just making, thank you. I was thinking of my buddy over there. He was like, I got 8.5 months and I'm the CPC chair. And I was like, good. I was thinking, I want to see who's here with less than a year. First of all, you're not alone. There's a hand over there. And now we all know where they are. Oh, so we're going to love on you. So get ready, you know. Oh my goodness. I just want to say a moment to thank you to the committee for inviting me, and it's an honor and a privilege, you know. I don't know how you guys are in AA, but, you know, I can be rather judgmental, you know, and I feel like, and as an alcoholic, I'm like reporting. I'm just observing, you know. I kind of know what I want, what I don't want, the winners, the triers, you know, like all that stuff. And I do it in service too. You got good, I love that speaker. Oh, that speaker, you just gotta, pray your way through it or whatever. And so all of that judgment comes back when it's your turn in the pool. And you get that. And that's the thing I'll pass on to you in service with your journey in service is the same. All that resentment and judgment, it breeds an opportunity for compassion. I'll leave it there, So here I am, and so what I know to be true is that fear. I always get nervous when I share, and what I know is, what I've learned from practicing AA in my life is, and taking the inventory and putting on paper the fear is, what I see is that how self-reliance failed me. And so when I get afraid and nervous, one is I know I'm excited, and two, it's something about fear. Sometimes it's exciting and oh my God, and sometimes it's very scary. But the thing is common. It's a reminder that of self-reliance will fail you. And it's that moment where we learn in the program is to pause and we ask for, what would you have me be? Help me to see and say the truth, and as I've had experienced it, to pass it on. So that's what I'm hoping to do. I set a timer because even though this is I'm so ironic, because even though I got sober at 15, oh my God, you'd think I drank 45 years the way I can go on about a drunk-a-log. And so I set a timer to remind myself, Diva, it's time to move on, So I call myself, I don't know what it is, you pick up nicknames, and lately, my daughter is 24 now, and she's been living with me since the pandemic, and I get to listen all this stuff, like, forget as Bill sees it. It's like you get to see she's not a millennial, a Gen X, as a Gen X sees it. And not only that, she's a Gen Xer with years of growing up in AA. I mean, this girl came to her first meeting, in the basket, 3 weeks sober because, oh my God, Mama and Daddy needed a meeting. We had just made a people, So we were like, oh my God, just remember that. A lot of times people show up to meetings and they look like a bug just on the, hitting the windshield. It's because the reality has hit them. They have not just bought a TV, This is not a mortgage on a house, you know what I'm saying? This is a people. And so I did that. So she grew up in AA, and listening to her, she calls all of our people say diva. Like, instead of like girlfriend, back for me, I'm like, that generation was like, oh girl, this and that, girl. And then they call each other diva. So that's why I'm calling you diva. So don't put it on your 10th step. Oh my goodness, I have not given an AA talk this early in the morning, so this will be really fun, I think. And I've only had 1 cup of coffee too, so this is like an experience for me. Anyway, I feel very comfortable. There's something about Area 51. It's like, when I was talking about, it's one of those service areas that has got that reputation of like, wow, there's some serious service going on. Like, that's a great area. It's active, it's got just all these legacies going on, the 3 legacies. And I mean, ever since growing up in AA, so to come down here, and it's like in the back of my mind, I'm asking this question, why? But I can really see why. So if you're new to service here, besides welcome, it's just like I see why, that the people who stood up as past trusted servants, of this area, I know as a trustee, and the people you have at the board right now, there's people from Area 51, they all took their seat at one of these with the goldenrod, and trying to figure out, was this orange? I thought it was orange. What's golden? Oh, it must be the yellow one and the blue. And well, why don't they just put it on one damn piece of paper? And why is the schedule so long? They're all there. They were all sitting there. And just remember that too, like they all made that start, they all took that seat. So what's also very beautiful in the thing with the legacy and the triangle and the circle is I can't wait to see you one day at a time up at the office. One day I'm going to have your resume or somebody else on the desk. They're going to be, oh, that's so-and-so. I remember them when they were GSR. And they're putting their name in for AAWS director or grapevine director or a regional trustee or trustee at large, you know. Or a staff member. There's all these things that what I see the beginning of it. And having the inventory last night, I guess I just need to I'm just taking your inventory, but it's with love, you know. I was really impressed. I really appreciated the attentiveness. You know, besides being nice to me and attentive, it was nice to see how that you guys just don't do that with company. You know, you do it with each other for this fellowship. And so you get to help somebody like me, and so I want to talk about that. You know, somebody like me doesn't look like everybody else. So I can't identify with who's not in the room. Well, hell, like everybody, as far as I'm concerned, wasn't in the room because everybody was over 18. You know, when I got here, I was 15, just scraping and struggling to stay drunk and loaded. And I was unable to hear, like I was just so jacked up. I mean, when you talk about powerlessness, for me, it was unableness. I was unable to hear the message. I was unable to read the big book. I was in a treatment center and they'd give me that book and I would start and I would just find myself kind of going into a sober blackout, and then you come 2-3 pages later, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not gonna work. What am I gonna do? And then I try to read the stories, and it was like, oh, somebody's like, yeah, there's a young person in the big book. And I was like, I think they got sober at 18, but when you're 15, that's like dog years, you know? And so it was just kind of like a lot of barriers, and I was afraid, oh my God, I was afraid of black people, white people, younger, people who said they were young but they weren't. I was scared of men, women, like there was just a lot of things. And so all I could tell you is that I could not drink. I loved alcohol, but I was confused because it was my best friend and it turned on me. My thing about it was, I'm gonna put this timer because I like, oh, you're talking about drinking, girl, hit the button. I loved alcohol. It was my best friend from the earliest of days. Thanks to taking the steps, I've been given the freedom to see a little more truth about myself. So if you're newish, I'm saying my official newcomers, 10 years or less, you know, I feel like, because I gotta speak to the new people, you know, you will take those steps, and what I found is that it gave me a freedom of recovery, the freedom to look back at my past and see the truth that led to me becoming this self-sufficient, self-propulsion disaster. And it helped me to see enough without the pain, because I never could look at myself. It wasn't that I wanted to be a pathological liar, it just hurt to see the truth. And so, but I was able very quickly, as the program started, I was the kid that I felt abandoned on this planet. It just seemed like the people that were my parents just did not have the right technology to do that job. And I was afraid of them from an early age. I never understood what does whipping do? You know, like it just made me scared and have to fend for myself. It never really taught me anything except how to run and how to lie, how to protect myself, live on self-propulsion. I never could connect the message. And I had that kind of brain. I was a struggler. I struggled to connect with the way the world seemed to be and the lessons it was trying to teach me. And I always had this pressure of, if you do not be good, you are going to hell. And because people who do bad things go to hell and good people go to heaven. And I thought, sucks. I'm with people who can't help me be good, and I'm going to hell, and I'm like 5 years old, and so my dad told me this story. I was 5, and he was like, "Oh my God, where's Diana?" That was like that was probably my full name. "Oh my God, where's Diana?" So he's looking down the steps, and I'm on the porch, and he says, "I'm talking to God. Like, I'm having a one-on-one. I wanted to speak to the manager at 5." And that was a pretty interesting thing. And years later, with some inventory and sobriety, we talk more and more about that. And what I realized, I feel like through it, I feel like a spiritual experience. Sometimes you have them, and they're not this white light that people share, but for me, it's just these moments of profound truth where you really can see things. Kind of like when you're on acid and you haven't gone too far, and you see it all. And it's like, it's like, I always need to listen to the Wilson sisters. That's hard if you're too young to know that, And so I always was that person. But seeing that truth in sobriety, I realized he was right. And I was asking God to keep me on the path. I didn't want to go to hell by mistake, and I was sad. And so I say that to set the tone that I was deficient. My factory design was not able to take all this in and deal. When I started drinking, all that changed. It was like finally getting the, I was gonna just say the 300 megabyte per second hookup, It didn't make me bigger, stronger, amazinger, but I got the information I needed. I felt like it just helped me see things for what they were and clearer. I knew I would be okay. My life, I will figure it out. However, what I didn't notice was from that day on, I always tried to make it back to alcohol. I was always waiting to figure out when I could have another drink. And as a kid, it's the party life. Your parents' party, it's not yours. But as a little kid, I would wake up in the mornings and clear the glasses. At night, I found out where the liquor cabinet was, and I felt like once you find out the liquor cabinet, your problems have just begun if you're an alcoholic, because you're obsessed. You've got to figure out how to get that stuff and not get found out. And so these little things I started to see as I took inventory, the obsession of the mind, and the stories I would tell myself. I'm a person, when I say I was riddled with fear, what I mean is that I became a master at telling myself scary stories. Because when you live by self-propulsion, you rely on your own wit. And unfortunately for me, I'm a scary storyteller. I guess I had that motto, like, you might as well get to the worst first, and if you survive it, then you can deal with the rest. And so I just was riddled with fear, telling myself scary stories, and so every time I would not drink, and I would be a kid, I just would feel like my brain would fall apart. I felt like the world was too fast. And I used to think it was because my first memories of life were on the island of Guam, which is a little Pacific, on the ocean, a little island. And my dad was stationed there during Vietnam. He was he was a corpsman, and he's a Coast Guard corpsman. And he, because of the way he felt about family, he did not want us to go back to Canada. My mother's Canadian, so we would have went back to Canada, but he had us live with him, my brother and I, and my mom. We lived on Guam, and he would do these things, these humanitarian missions with the Coast Guard all over Vietnam. And so I guess I used to think The problem was we didn't live in Guam. I was one of those people that I felt in sync with the world and nature. And that's where I felt God's care, if anything. But when I came stateside to Long Beach, California, and we got stationed, I just was 3 steps behind. So drinking really was a friend. Now in today's world, I may be diagnosed with probably all kinds of stuff, and I don't really have an answer for you. So if you're listening to my story right now going, oh girl, like diva, you probably were undiagnosed. And, I just don't have, science may one day accomplish all of that, but it hasn't done so yet. So anyway, stateside, the beauty of living this way, this was my method of drinking. And I did that off and on as often as I could as a little kid. And then when I became a teenager, oh my God, thank God for being a teenager, because you could get out there and get it on. And I became fast friends with the people who loved to drink like me. And I was the kind of junior high girl that looked 18. And so I took that show on the road. It's like I intuitively knew how to capitalize on my assets, pardon the pun. And so I just drank, and it was fun when it was fun. It was fun when it was fun. And it was so horrible when it was horrible. And that's the problem with being an alcoholic, is I was unable to not drink more. I could not control how much I was going to drink. It was so unpredictable, and I can't stand up here and tell you all the times. And I think all of us as alcoholics who have taken a little time to see our past and inventory know the shame and humiliation of going too far, whether you were on the receiving end or the giving end. When we cross the line, we cross the line, and you can't take it back. And I had so many of those things to deal with in my inventory. And I remember it made sobriety harder and harder. And I remember particularly one party, I knew I had, everything said leave, 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 but the bottle, there were 2 big gallons of wine, and I thought, I am gonna stay for at least 2 big tumblers of that, and then I will catch the bus home. And then, I'm coming to in a closet with Louie, and it wasn't my plan. And so, that situation led me to my solution was I'm going to drink from home, because I couldn't face all the kids in school. And I just never once crossed my mind that you have a problem with alcohol. It just never crossed my mind. Like, why? I had one friend who stopped drinking and using in high school, and she was so weird, She was so weird. I just stayed away from her. And I was the kind of person, this is how I stopped drinking, because you could start to smell it on me in junior high. And but my thought was, well, I'm going to take, somebody's like, well, take the Black Beauties. And I was like, okay. And I was like, they only give you 2. And I was like, that's not going to be enough. And so I thought, my brain was like, well, I'll just chop them up and snort them, and maybe that will make it go faster. And so that's how I don't drink. And so, in junior high. And so I feel it's time. I'm gonna move now. So to what happened, to how I found AA is basically, I went to Louisiana. My dad's from central Louisiana, Bunkie, Louisiana, south of Alexandria, just in case anybody knows. And my mom's from central Canada, from a farm north of Edmonton. And these 2 people, so my dad sent me back home. And no matter, I never grew up down there, but it's home. And I think you understand that. Everybody goes home. And so they sent me home to get help. And these people, I love my family, and they do what they believe is right. And they took my troublesness and they set me to prayer. And after they started working on me, I remember I got prayed on in my one Aunt Diana's church. And then they kind of realized the scope of the problem. And then And then my other auntie took me to the other church, and I got saved and prayed on twice in 1 week, because they were like shocked at just the poison, the ugliness, the problems of this person. And they thought, if we're just I was into punk rock, I look like punk rock, Ronald McDonald, child from hell, this is when I just crazy, it's like bug hitting windshield, just a mess. And so they were trying to put me back together, and I wanted it. I was tired of just doing the deal, Drinking and using is hard. So after a month, I was put back together. My hair was nice, and that's a whole other story. All I'm gonna say is I was a mixed girl with bad hair, and that's if you've watched any of the Harry Potter movies, that's like a squib. It's like a magical person born in a magical family with no magic. I just was that's how I felt. I don't know that's how they felt, but that's how I felt. And it was such a sense of shame for me because my grandmother would be like, come here and get your grandmother's purse. You got to give that lady more money because you got a lot of hair and it's so hard. And they all had nice hair and they would just make fun of me. And that was the thing about sobriety. I hated being teased for being different. So anyway, I stayed there a month. I was doing okay. And then they had the corn festival. And I was just there eating some nice, I don't know how it is in North Carolina, but I was eating some fried alligator and boudin, and it was good, and I got handed this beautiful glass of whatever the home thing was going on there. It was, yes, I know, it's time. So, and I started drinking, and I thought this was the fleeting thought. It's okay, there's a lot of fruit, it's ice, it's just got some alcohol in it. And that led on. And then before I know it, I'm drunk and partying. I'm in somebody's car, meeting somebody's friend. And I fell in love with this guy because this was a big old red guy named Red. His name was Keith, but I fell in love with him. He had these big old muscles and the way he would hold his beer and drink. I was you know what I'm talking about, man. This guy is not judging. He's not judging my drinking. And it is on. We fell in love. And he promised me the world as soon as he got out of high school, man, And that love when you're crazy and lonely. But then you have to get sober. Oh, we were sealing the deal of that hope all over town, and the humiliation of that, oh my God. One more time, I'm standing. You're in trouble. You don't get asked to sit, you're standing. And all I can hear is the ice rattling. My aunt was so mad, she had to have a few drinks before she could talk to me, because she was just and I just remember that Crown Royal. I loved Crown. It smelled like velvet to me. I never got my hands on their Crown Royal, but they're the glass, And she was off. She was so mad and so humiliated and confused. And the idea of being saved and all this love in the family, and to end up not only drinking, but to just tear it and burn it down and embarrass the family and all this stuff. The bewilderment and hatred and shame, she shouldn't hate her namesake, but she kind of did. She was so angry. I know as a parent how angry, I know all of those feelings, but because of alcohol, she just did not understand. Why can't you just drink? You have beer, you're high school. And I didn't have an answer either. I'd been put in front of those conversations many times, but it just was more shameful. Because she was telling me, oh, they're not, but he loves me. No, and she spelled all that out. And I just, when you're holding on to your last fantasies, they're hard to let go of. And she sent me back to California. And I told my dad everything. Oh my God. My dad, he was not Mr. Rogers Brown, you know. My dad was he was a scary guy. To me, he was for many years tall, 6'3", first African American corpsman, Coast Guard, Vietnam vet. I mean, this guy had been through some stuff to get where and the last thing he wants is somebody to tear it all down. And to have his heart and soul tear it down. And I think we all know this. There is a sound that we all know when the heart is broken, because we've all done it. And you may not, if you're new or new-ish, you may not remember that sound yet, but it's coming. But just be okay, because you're going to be in the middle of service, and you're going to be in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when those memories hit, you're going to be okay. We'll hold you in the middle, so you can walk through that and understand what you have to do to make those things right. Because there are things that you won't be able to make right. And for many years, that was on my list. And I will say until like maybe a couple years ago. So for 37 years, I stay sober knowing I cannot make that. I don't know how to amend his broken heart. And we have had to live that way with the family not quite healed. There were just some things they were unable to forgive. So coming into AA, sorry, I've got to, I was ready. I was ready to come into AA. That plane ride home, I just felt, I had a moment of clarity where I saw all the things and the problems. I saw alcohol for the first time, and this was like a nanosecond. But it wasn't enough to keep me sober. And then it happened again. I was home, lonely. I was smoking a joint, you know, and I'm looking at the clouds, and I saw all these people, and I was like, oh no, like the flashbacks are coming back. And but they were all these people, and for the other moment of clarity was like, wow, I wish I could find and be with all these people, and I wish they were, but I've tried church and that doesn't work, you know. I don't want to hurt more people, but it sure be nice, you know. They're not at the beach or the park, because those people, we always go on adventures, and little did I know, like a few months later, I would start going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always think about that. It was maybe God's way and his funny way of giving me that vision. So I found AA, and my mom came home and said, "You've got a problem, I think." And I said, yes. And that was another miracle. I just didn't have it in me. And I want to back that up. What made her all of a sudden say that? And that's where you all come in. And before she died, I asked her about this. And to her best of the recollection, she was having a tough day, and she went to the EAP folks. And they told her about Alcoholics Anonymous and treatment for kids and blah, 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 resources. So somehow and who told her? So like, who told the EAP person? And it was probably one of you guys, you know, like calling your sponsor, like talking about your relationship or something, what they're doing, and then your sponsor's like, you know, go help somebody, go pay a service, get out of yourself, you know. Why don't you go to your EAP at your job and talk to them about Alcoholics Anonymous, give them some pamphlets, you know, live a little for Christ's sake, you know, bye. My sponsor was like, that's kind of how she was. She was like, Diana, do you know what rhymes with sick? So use that one too. She's so funny. So it's kind of like that, I was saying. And so, yeah, when you have no car, you have nowhere to go, and you're 15 getting sober, it's like people just dog you out, man. They know you have nowhere else to go. But the irony comes is you'll outlive them all, you know, you can stay sober. So anyway, but I think that's important, because my mom got resources, and part of the resources included some information about AA, you know? And I guess what I could say is I'm the product of one pamphlet. I want you to think about that when you're thinking of, hey, I know you guys were talking about local resources last night, and hey, we could do a PSA, or we can do something more, audio visual locally. And, just think about it. It just takes, instead of maybe just one pamphlet, it takes maybe one view of that PSA you're going to create, or one view of that little video you're going to have somebody get that impression and pass it on. And so I just want to offer that to you. I have no idea who that person was, but it just took one pamphlet. And in the 82, that was our media. We had the late night TV ads, we had in the newspaper, we had the pamphlets. And man, back in the 80s, we were styling, man. We had pamphlets, in color, So nowadays, it's up to us, to make that happen again. So I heard about my sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. There was something that I wanted to read, because I usually read it at the end. But I realized, no, I want to read it now, because it is what happened. It says on page 100 in the chapter Working with Others, it's one of my favorite chapters. It says, both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. And so I think about that when the people at, Bellflower Big Book, people at Inner City Fellowship Hall at the 11 a.m. meeting, and I went to, oh my God, so many meetings. I always think that was the opening scene. There's a room. That's what, when you want to say, what does that mean, the music of Alcoholics Anonymous? It's that paragraph. That is what the people of AA are when they're ready, in the meeting, before the meeting, everybody's talking, nobody's listening. It's just that chatter. Like you heard it last night in the inventory sessions when one break would happen, all of a sudden the roar, and all of that. People are showing up, they're suiting up, they've got their coffee seat saved, they got one eye on you and one eye on the door for who's walking in. And here I show up in the early 80s, just looking like Bill the Cat, from Blooms County, I guess. And just like that was my nickname in the treatment center. They called me Bill for Bill the Cat. So I just Bill the Cat, because I was so out of it. I just would, like I said in the beginning. And so they were all basically in the 80s, they're, let's just face it, life is life and it's not perfect. And, the challenges we have now with color lines and gender lines and all that stuff was there, but we weren't even talking about it, It was just like, you're going to go over there and you're going to go over there and we're not going to talk about that. And if you come to this meeting, you got to keep all that locked down. But here comes me, 15, goofy as hell, and I don't have a ride, so I'll be coming back. And all I did is just like chain smoke. This was me in sobriety, man. I was holding my cup of coffee so I didn't spill it on you, and just smoking. I just would turn my head, because I thought if I tried to smoke like you guys with the open arms thing, I just couldn't deal. And they're kind of looking at me and I'm looking at them, and I think about that chapter in Working with Others, that whatever they had to do to pause and think about this person to carry the message to them. And I just think how to put themselves in my place, so they would try the best they could to see, well, how would I want to be approached? And I get choked up because they did that. And I just want to talk about that. A lot of times I'll say, oh, the men and women in AA loved me back to health. But I just want to break it down a little bit because I've had times in sobriety where it's very hard to do that. And the first thing they did is they walked over and they stuck out the heart of the alcoholic, which is the handshake. You know, that thing I talked about last night was like that, the responsibility, that authority goes down the service triangle to the conference and then it comes back up and it goes through responsibility, and then the groups that delegate all that authority, that hand of the alcoholic. And the reason I say that, because that hand reached me and touched me, and they did it in such a way that was so intuitively safe. And the last thing I wanted to be in Alcoholics Anonymous was a 15-year-old girl. Like, I had drank away my childhood, and I wasn't looking to look back anywhere, but I was desperate for something. I was tired of going back out there getting my butt kicked, and I was terrified to be sober. I was unable to tell the truth. I was unable to trust. That was always a trigger. Trust was a trigger. But the hand of AA was there, and they just made it incredibly safe. I got a handshake, a cup of coffee, a cigarette, a seat, and they talked to me a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous, and just enough to encourage me to stay. Now, there were enough of people who patted me on the back, you know. There were definitely a handful that patted me on the butt, you know. And I don't recommend those 12-step calls, you know. Oh my God, you know. I'm glad I was so self-obsessed. It's like it makes their skin real tough, you know. And I knew enough to know that that's not the norm of AA, you know, those 13-step calls, but I wanted to stay. And so I remember my first prayers were that the tradition 2, the God of tradition 2, and they just pointed at that, and like, that can help you. You know, you can come here and just ask that higher power to help you hear what you need to hear, and you'll find out if you're alcoholic and you want what we have. We can't tell you that. But they said, I will tell you, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, you don't have to know it all, you don't have to do it right, but we'll go to hell and back for you, with you, kind of thing. And that's what they did. I got tucked under their arm, and like I said, I had this incredible sense of self. I started to see and realize that I was a 15-year-old kid, and all of life kind of hit me in the back, was just coming in, boom, 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 and what am I going to do? How am I going to solve these problems? And how am I going to have a sponsor? And like I said, I was scared of all these people, and God brought me Rachel. And Rachel was 27, and she was 5 years sober, and she was like just platinum sober, man. She was on fire with AA. And I was looking, she looked, I thought she was Hawaiian, you know. She was like Mexican woman, maybe, or Hawaiian, I don't know. But, and then after we started working with her, she told me her story, and she's like, there's something I have to tell you, you know, I'm a little different than the other women in AA. And she's like, you know, I was born a boy, and I have been living as a woman since I was 13. And back in the 80s, transgender, we were like, that was like 3 beers too much, man. That was like, we were like, what? We were like, what? We never heard about that. That was many years before Pose, you know? And so, but it was so Pose. And so some people in AA were like, no, you gotta stay away from her. And some people said nothing. And thank God for that. But I wanted what she had, and what came to me is this person, in spite of her differences, she has become a part of AA. And she was on fire. I mean, I made that choice. She left the room. She came back. She says, what is it going to be? Kid. She always called me kid. And I said, I'm in, you know, like I want to do this. I want to be sober. And she took me on a roller coaster ride. I mean, I did my 3rd step. She had me at the plank of a pool. Like God used the best of her to carry the message of sobriety to me. She had me turning it over. I want you to stand on this pool, the diving board, and stand there. And she's like, at first she did it. She jumped and she did a flip and went in the water. And then she's like, I want you to do it now. And I'm like, and she just like, okay, you just stand there and, you know, you do your best shot. And she was like teaching me this tradition, step 3. Oh my God, it was just hilarious when I look back, you know, the attentiveness, her willingness to be flexible and patient. I was ditching school, breaking into her house, and all this crazy stuff. I was not a rocket to stardom, but as I began the first 4 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, she's like, we're gonna surrender. The first 4 steps are surrender. I'm surrendering to alcoholism. I'm surrendering to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm surrendering, like I said, self-sufficiency. And we look, chapter 3. Chapter 3 for me was like talking about where I had been with alcohol, but then she talked about it in terms of my willfulness, the delusion of self-propulsion, the delusion of self-knowledge. Fred and Jim, my buds, and how in sobriety, over and over again, and I was talking with my friend last night at that dinner. Oh my God, the raffle just blew my mind. That was so fun last night. It was like Rockstar Penthouse, you know, we were all up there eating this amazing barbecue. That was so cool, thank you for that. But I had this one great conversation about, you know, for me, I was an addict alcoholic. I was like, I am not gonna be an alcoholic. And for the first 4 months, I said, I'm Diana, I'm an addict. And they were kind of, I feel like somebody's like, we don't want her to go and kill herself, but they kind of dealt with that. But there was this guy, Roy, after I guess he felt I had enough time under my belt, I got up there one night and he's like, Diana, are you an alcoholic? And I'm looking at him like, of course, like, what are you doing, Roy? Like, and I was like, no. And he's like, well, this is an open meeting. We're so glad you're here, darling, but you need to have a seat because only alcoholics share at the podium. And oh my God, I left the room. I left just like that, Scarlett O'Hara, serious drama. And this is typical me, sober self-will. I'm standing outside. Not only are my cigarettes in the meeting, but my ride. So I'm feeling like a chump. You know, what do? You stand at the turning point and you wait. And then big drama in the meeting. They were mad at each other, but Ruthie came out with the big book and she's like, we read chapter 3 again and she's like, Diane, we got to switching from scotch to brandy and she's like, listen, not everybody literally drinks scotch and switch to brandy. Like, we all have a story to tell in Alcoholics Anonymous and you're gonna have to tell yours. And it's what does it do for you kind of thing. She left that book and she walked in. She said, you can walk in and sit with me when you're ready. And so I have a seat for you. And I'm so glad she didn't, come on, Mija, you know. I just feel like it was enough dignity, but it takes courage and humility to go back into the meeting and take a seat after you've burned it down to the ground. And I've had so many of those experiences in AA where I have to, oh my God, I gotta go back to the meeting and have a seat. I always wish you'd think about that before you do your future 4-step. And we were talking about that at the thing too. I was talking to somebody like, oh yeah, the things we do and mistakes in sobriety, it's like, oh, that's a 4-pager right there. But anyway, what happened is 9 months, and then after maybe I was an addict alcoholic, and they were like, okay, welcome, you know, welcome. And I shared, and then things more happened, and then I became an addict alcoholic. And that was cool. And then by the time I became an alcoholic, it was the conclusion, about 1.5 years sober. I was doing the deal, but not doing the deal. And I can just, my experience with half measures, it avails you nothing. You think you're getting something, but then 1.5 years, it all crashed down, and I was driving home. I'd been out partying sober with my buds, driving from Hollywood, and I'm driving back to Long Beach, and all these people are going to work. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? Except I was sober. And not to get all into it, but I had got into a rough crowd because if nothing changes, nothing changes. The delusion of self-propulsion and self-sufficiency. And I guess I just had to have that experience to conclude to my innermost self that I have alcoholism, that I could do all those things out there, and one more time I'm ripping and running with a rough crowd, you know, people who are, when I think of on the fringe of AA, I'm talking about sub-legal activities, but you can, whatever you have to call the fringe, the acts of surrender. And at a year and a half, I came to my sponsor because of that experience. It's never a big kaboom. It's always those little things that get me. Decent people going to work in traffic, and I'm coming home one more time, and I know I'm going to drink again because there's nothing left to do. So I get to Rachel's house one more time, and she has me read chapter 3, but this time keeping in mind a year and a half sober. And that's where I understood more about alcoholism. And I was one more time that act of surrender. You know, I'm an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable. And I came to believe that there is a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. And I made that decision. And we started on the last act of surrender, that 4th step. And I was always unable because of my self-sufficiency and self-propulsion. I lacked the power to put down on paper the things blocking me from this connection with God. And so this time it was different. I was able to just go, I've got 2.5%, God. And God was like, all right, I'll make up the difference, let's go. And so we wrote this inventory, and I would ask God to just help me put the things blocking me. And we did the first column, the second, and it just happened, and it went with there. And then the 5th, for me, the 5th step was seeing, my part. I had to, some of them, I had to really just take my time and slow it down and just ask for praying for that person, the resentment prayer. And by doing that slowly, for me, it gave me the time I needed to have my higher power help me, you know, like I felt heal me from the inside out. So then when I was able to get that feeling, I could see where my mistakes were, and I listed them and looked at my part. And one more time, you have those almost like acid-like experiences where you see the truth. And I could see where my mistakes were. Like, I remember one time there was this kid, he was 16, I was 8, and I saw him doing some bad things to some kids, and he came over and he wanted to like do something to me because I was a witness. And my dad was out to sea, and I was really lonely. And I remember he talked me into opening the door. I was home alone, and he got me like bad. But I remember when I got to that part of the inventory, I remember it wasn't that, oh, you opened the door, it's your fault. But what it was is it allowed me with love and gentleness to see the loneliness that I had as a human being, and the self-propulsion and that self-propulsion, you know, that I was a kid trying to take care of a kid myself, and how lonely I was. And that kind of truthful compassion that only God has given me allowed me to put things down in my inventory. And so when I shifted to the next 4 steps, it was steps 5 through 8, it was in alignment. I aligned myself to this higher power with the help of my sponsor, and looking at it through the 5th step and seeing these defects. And for me, a lot of it was getting down to the old ideas. I did not really understand or comprehend the 7 deadly sins. I just wasn't part of my upbringing. But what she did help me is make a list of all my old ideas. You know, not being good enough, the story about, you know, people are only going to love you if you're winning, all the little phrases we have in our head. And then we talked about what new ideas could be if we align ourselves with this program. And I listed those, and those were going to be my ideals that I worked on in every area of my life. And so the recovery came first from surrender and having this higher power and beginning a relationship. So what started to happen in alignment is I started to become a we. Instead of a me-centered sobriety, it was a we, me and my higher power. And this relationship has become, it's like a dance. when you start learning how to dance with a partner, it's very awkward because you don't know each other's movements and energies. But over time, you get that rhythm going, and some days you're off, and some days you're not. But that's how it's been with my higher power, very kind, strong, but loving and caring. And so when I did the A step and making this list, I just felt it was going to be okay. It's a journey. When we talk about the journey and the adventure of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understood. And I took that show on the road. And one of the things that happened in making amends in high school, I'm in high school and I'm going back to junior high making these amends, is I started to have some of the promises. And the new freedom, my first experience with that was one day I'm at a high school. It's a regular high school. That was always off the table. When I got sober, I was in a continuation school with all my friends out on parole and little homies, you know. That was me, little Bill, like homie. Because I knew there's never gonna be, I drank away my childhood. I'll never be one of those, just a kid in high school. But my sponsor had a different viewpoint. So I was in Poly High School at the dance in the quad at lunch, and I remember turning around. It's the 80s, everybody's pop locking, doing all this crazy stuff for the football rally. And I turned around and it's like I ran into myself, and I was like, I saw myself. I was this kid in high school. I looked just like them, and I had a profound feeling that I felt just like them. It was the most profound sense of innocence. So that new freedom and new happiness, for me, it started out with just being a kid again. All that stuff washed away. It was neutral. It was still my past, but it wasn't there anymore. I could tell the story, but not live with the past. And I wanted more of that. But I never thought in my life that I would ever get a chance to be young and be a kid and innocent and live life. And when I had that, man, I held on to Alcoholics Anonymous like you just don't even, you know. And so Rachel and I jumped into service. I mean, she had me, I was like, that broad, she always called herself a tough broad, you know, I'm a tough broad, you know. And we would go to Red Gate Detox. We would do all of the panels, you know, H&I panels. And I got introduced to Bill Honeycutt, Bill and Frank Honeycutt, and then they did the prison thing. And so things were a little different back then, but basically, like I said, still born looking 18. I wasn't quite 18, but I was close enough. And so he'd be like, you know, you show up here at this corner with the dress on and do this and that, and we're gonna go for a ride and go do some work. And so this guy was an old carny guy, and I did that. And I started going up with him to this middle security place in Tehachapi. And we would go up there and put on a meeting. And one more time on the outside, that paragraph that I read to you, I look 1,000 miles away from the people at that meeting. These guys were in there, they were in. And I remember one time this guy decided to say something to me after the meeting. And I'm so grateful. He shared a little bit about the anger and the stuff in his life that he saw in me, and the fear and the doubts. And he just said from his own experience to me, because he saw it in me, that, you know, you have nothing to lose, and just take this program, take this opportunity and go with it. And I needed to hear it from this guy. And so I just feel like what would have happened if he decided to not get off his chair and walk over there and talk to me? And if I was not willing to go sit with Bill and go to that meeting up in Tehachapi, I just don't know if I would have stayed, because I've thought of that guy in prison all my sobriety. And so fast forward, I end up working at GSO. And my path and my career, I was like, the last 4 steps was the execution of God's will. And part of that was, where can I be of service? Where can I be useful? Where can I contribute? I was kind of surprised, but God kind of thought, I'm going to be a really good chemist and a good scientist. And so God put me in the biotech world doing research and development. and pharmaceutical companies. And I worked in that career for 20 years, and I had to get education for it. And I was telling you how afraid I was to be good. I was afraid to be visible. But I had the needed power to make progress. I've never been a perfection person. Every time I've done that, it's always ended up in a surrender and an inventory. But spiritual progress, the path of spiritual progress, remarkable things have happened to me, and traveling and all that stuff, and making things right with, like I said, my dad. My dad's 80 and he's on his way to Jamaica with his girlfriend. They met online. My brother had to like get his online thing hooked up. And then once we got it all hooked up, Dad was ripping, man. And he met this nice lady who's 70, and then they're off to Jamaica today. And we roar. We have such a good time. And my mom, till the day she died, you know, it was always not 100%. And it wasn't because we were angry. It's just my mom was a broken person, and she could only give me 62%. And it took me 20-something years at least to accept that. She could give me 62%. And so I learned how to stay sober with a mom that could love me 62%. And that's another freedom of this program. So anyway, coming to GSO, I remember working on the corrections desk, and what a gift. What a gift to give back. Just like somebody gave me one pamphlet, it took one pamphlet to help get myself to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't even read the pamphlet. It was my mom. So if I can sit and write 500, 600, sometimes 700 letters a month to inmates, you know, about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like a debt that I happily paid. And I've rotated. You know, the thing about the 3 triangles, and I'm going to take all my stuff and go. It's all about a we. We say it's a we program, and you might be going, well, what the heck does that mean? Because you know how we are, old-timers. We're always speaking like Yoda. And but I'm going to tell you and leave it with this. It's those 3 sides of the triangle. It's unity, recovery, service. And that recovery, that 12 steps that I shared briefly with you, it's the we, me in a relationship with my higher power. And then as I started to do the traditions, for me, I used the traditions to keep me in AA long enough until I could get a sponsor. But then I also saw the we, that it's a group, you know, the we of the group, and how I could be a partner and in my group community, and also in the collection of groups in a district. And as you see today, the collection of districts in the thing we call area, this we of the traditions. But then the we of the concepts, it goes even farther. It's just this broader we. It's the we when you've had that perfect martini and you're just looking around glowing. It's that feeling, but we have it in sobriety. It's the we of being among us, feeling like you're abroad on the highway, talking to somebody. I couldn't tell you what their name was, but we have had great talks this weekend, you know? That we of the concepts of service, of world service. And so I'm just really happy and grateful and appreciate your patience letting me talk a little longer, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. I related to a lot.